Thanks everyone for coming this evening. I think this is the first time, actually it is the first time that we've held an inaugural State of the City address, so I appreciate you taking an interest in your government and for joining us this evening. The format of the presentation is pretty straightforward. There's some issues that were identified by the community that I'd like to touch on as we go through the presentation, and then I'm going to be turning it over to our city manager, Adam Hammett, who's going to drill down on some of the details, priorities for the various departments as we look into 2019 and beyond. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce to you the City Council. These folks volunteer countless hours to do the hard work of the city, and trust me, it's not easy work at times. So I'd like to introduce Andy Fury, Katie Williams, Frank Sweeney, Ryan Hennon, and Melissa Hartman, and thank them for the good work they do. Go back a second. I'd also like to acknowledge the excellent staff and the directors that we've assembled here at the city. Without the joint efforts of the City Council and our staff under the leadership of Adam Hammett, I don't think we'd be able to accomplish what we have over the past couple years under Adam's helm, and I hope moving forward that will continue. So a big round of applause for our dedicated staff and directors here tonight as well. I also see a lot of volunteers in the audience. As you know, the city hosts about 20 plus volunteer boards to keep the city moving forward. And a big thanks to those volunteers who contribute their time as well. So times are changing. I recall when I moved to Whitefish about 25 years ago, I dropped my girlfriend at the time off at the airport and drove into Whitefish for the first time. It was about 7:30 on a Monday morning. I was heading to work up in Eureka for the Forest Service, and I had never been to Whitefish before. I had just heard a lot about it, but I was moving here straight out of college, and I remember entering town from Highway 40. It was all blinking lights coming through town, and I said, what a ghost town. How am I going to adapt to this place? We're much different 25 years later, and although our population is still hovering around 6,500 full-time residents, I can tell you that we have the complexities of a large city. Anytime you're dealing with an annual population of about 6,000 to 7,000 that quickly escalates to 20,000 to 25,000 visitors and residents alike in the summer, it presents challenges. It presents challenges for our police, our fire, our ability to provide timely services to the community. And so we're a very unique community in that respect. I want to acknowledge Heidi with the pilot. Back in February 2019, she did some excellent reporting and polled the community on the issues that were of significance to members of our community. And not surprisingly, what rose to the top of the list was growth and sustainability, tourism, taxes and affordability, water quality and open space, affordable housing, and of course, transportation and infrastructure. So how are we positioning the city today to address these challenges? I hope you leave tonight knowing that we do have a plan and that we have a clear vision for how this community will grow. And I hope that you also leave with the trust in your elected officials and your directors and staff to lead this city forward as you leave this evening. So every year, the city of Whitefish, the city council works with staff, directors to basically develop a list of broad scale policies and goals for the upcoming fiscal year. The goals span all departments, and we recognize that there's only so much that we can do in any given year. So we try to accomplish a lot, but at the end of the day, some priorities fall to the bottom of the list or get pushed off to the following year. This slide is just an example of what we're actually considering for adoption tonight during our regularly scheduled meeting. And as you can tell, it involves a variety of long-range as well as short-range planning goals. This year, we're looking to implement a long-term master plan for the fire department, just to name a few. We're completing the final phase of the Armory Park redevelopment project in downtown Whitefish. We're hoping to update our citywide transportation plan, updating various zoning ordinances and codes, and of course, finally implementing our much needed affordable housing program. And I think these goals that we've developed as a council in conjunction with staff really do reflect the issues that this community has brought to our attention this past year. And we all know that we are growing. In addition to the seasonal fluctuations in population related to second homeowners, we're also seeing a steady increase in full-time residents. The attached graph up in front of you assumes about a 2.5% annual growth rate. And as shown, we're expected to reach about 12,000 residents, up from 6,500 today, or about a 50% increase by 2035. And of course, that's right around the corner. We use these growth models to essentially guide our planning efforts, everything from our transportation studies, our transportation grid, to the water and wastewater infrastructure that we need to operate and maintain to deliver clean water to the city of Whitefish. But the take-home message is we're certainly growing, and there's no way to avoid that. But one thing we're not naive to is the fact that we do have issues related to tourism growth, including housing, transportation, infrastructure, quality of life, and that some of us don't depend on tourism for our livelihoods, but many do. And this is why we have formed the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan Steering Committee. The Whitefish travel and recreation industry recognizes our greatest asset in the marketplace is our great outdoors, access to public lands, Glacier National Park, and our distinct downtown community. We understand the long-term economic advantage for the Whitefish travel and recreation industry lies with visitors in our ability to align their needs with the vision of our Whitefish residents, and to have respect for our natural and cultural assets as well as our community character. With that said, we've partnered with the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau to establish a shared strategic vision for tourism, which includes developing a long-term plan that will assure the community-based economic development, promotion, and conservation are beneficial to all who choose to live and raise families in Whitefish. Similar to past years working with the CVB, we will also continue strategically marketing Whitefish as a premier authentic mountain town. In particular, a niche market we refer to as the geo-traveler, which are low-impact, high-yield visitors that come to Whitefish to experience Glacier National Park, the outdoors, access to public lands, as well as the experiences that are indeed unique for a town of our size, the restaurants, the bars. And trust me, these visitors contribute substantially to our resort tax collections, which is one of the reasons this past year we're able to rebate over $1.2 million in property tax relief back to the residents of Whitefish. Another goal and concern of the community voiced in the February pilot was open space, conservation, and of course recreation. And for a small community, from my perspective, we have made tremendous strides and accomplishments when it comes to conservation, and recreation has truly been the catalyst or conduit for many of these conservation projects throughout Whitefish. Together with our state, federal, and private land partners, we have literally conserved close to 19,000 acres of forested working lands in and around Whitefish. In particular, the Haskell Basin Conservation Easement Project, the Trumbull Creek Easement, both in partnership with Stoltz Land and Lumber Company, and of course the recent conservation easement at the north end of Whitefish Lake encompassing 10,000 acres of Weyerhaeuser properties, keeping these forests working and open to the public for general use. And from my perspective, it's a significant piece of the economic puzzle for Whitefish. And we are quickly becoming undoubtedly a model nationally for how to blend conservation efforts with recreation. And the facts are fairly staggering. Every year, over about 600,000 out-of-state visitors come to Flathead County, and they spend at least one night in Whitefish. They shop in our restaurants, they drink in our bars, they shop in our shops, they stay at our local bed and breakfasts and hotels, and they contribute significantly to our resort tax. Over 80% of the visitors polled indicate that they come to Whitefish in the Flathead Valley to, number one, visit Glacier National Park, and number two, to experience open spaces, clean water, and open areas that they can enjoy from a recreational standpoint. This past year, some pretty compelling data. Whitefish Legacy Partners conducted an economic study to actually quantify the economic impact the Whitefish Trail has on the local area economy. And that study basically concluded that over $6 million in direct consumer spending can be related directly to the Whitefish Trail system, and about 60 full-time local jobs can be attributed to the trail system as well. And it's not unique to Whitefish. If you look at the broader Flathead County, about 25% of everyone's per capita income can be directly related to the presence of open spaces and public lands, and that's pretty compelling. It's a model we're following and hoping to continue with into the future. I want to thank everyone who voted in the 2015 special election to protect the city's water supply in Haskell Basin. As we all know, we have many threats to water quality in our local area water bodies, and this was identified as a major issue in the pilot article. Everything from aquatic invasive species to septic leachate to nutrient loading. From my perspective and this council's perspective, the health of Whitefish Lake is directly related to the economic health of Whitefish. We lose the lake, the economy suffers. We see this throughout the country with communities struggling to reverse the effects of aquatic invasive species invasions, as well as septic leachate contamination. So a number of years ago, in conjunction with Whitefish Lake Institute, we developed and launched a comprehensive aquatic invasive species program that requires mandatory inspections at City Beach, State Park, in coordination with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. We do early detection monitoring on several dozen lakes spanning from Eureka all the way south through the Swan Valley with grants. And we do that because we recognize that a local water body infestation would undoubtedly increase the risk of an infestation to Whitefish Lake. Septic leachate, I know you've learned a lot about in the newspapers the last few years. Whitefish Lake Institute concluded a major study that identified some hot spots around the lake that are certainly contributing to septic leachate contamination. We're continuing to work with those neighbors and homeowner associations in an effort to encourage the extension of sewer services to these outlying areas. But as a carrot, this isn't a land grab, it's not a money grab. It's sincerely about protecting that lake. And as part of those extension of services plans, we've also offered a deferment and annexation for up to 30 years for those properties so they can help offset the additional property tax with the cost of the special improvement district that would be required to build and maintain that infrastructure. So ongoing work related to water quality. And of course, I want to thank the voters of Whitefish who back in 2015, with an 84% approval margin, approved an increase to our local option sales tax, or our resort tax, from 2% to 3% to help fund a permanent conservation easement in the Haskell Basin Watershed. As many of you are aware, that's where the city derives about 90% of its annual water supply. And for over 100 years, the city operated and maintained its water diversions in Haskell Basin on little more than a handshake with our partners and the landowner, F.H. Stoltz Land and Lumber Company. As threats to Whitefish Lake become even more increasing, it's important that we safeguard this surface water source, not only for ourselves, but future generations of Whitefish residents. And the ancillary benefit to that project was obviously these lands are now open. All 3,000 acres of the Stoltz land is now open permanently for public recreation. And just 1 year ago, we developed, in partnership with Whitefish Legacy Partners, so many nonprofits to keep account for, we opened a new trailhead on Reservoir Road. That Reservoir trailhead links a 5+ mile single track recreation experience up to a new trailhead located off Big Mountain Road. And I'd like to give a big shout out to the efforts of Whitefish Legacy Partners, Glacier Nordic, Winter Sports Incorporated, and of course, Stoltz Land and Lumber Company and the state and federal partners that helped accomplish that project. It's truly been spectacular and a model that's being used and showcased throughout the country. And finally, housing. When I got involved 15 years ago with the city, housing was a hot topic. And it dates back to 1987 when the city adopted its urban renewal plan, which basically set the framework for the establishment of our tax increment finance district. So literally 31 years ago, we recognized providing, encouraging affordable housing for our service workers, our nurses, our firefighters, our paramedics, our school teachers would be paramount to maintaining the fabric of this community. Many of you probably don't realize, but about 52% of the Whitefish workforce actually in commutes from other communities in the valley, including Flathead County, Columbia Falls, and Kalispell. And from our perspective, that's not acceptable, and it highlights a major problem that we're facing as a city. Our service workers and all the folks I just mentioned deserve to have an opportunity to live where they work, and we're committed to that effort. We have some success stories that we're sharing with you tonight that Adam's going to actually touch on as it relates to our comprehensive affordable housing program. But we basically received about a $7 million low-income housing tax credit grant from the Montana Board of Housing this past year. And that project is going to be, those dollars are going to be used to develop a 38-unit affordable housing complex located on vacant land on Edgewood Drive. The actual housing units will target about 60% of the area median income, or folks earning about $32,000 or less. Similarly, there's been a lot of news regarding the city's snow lot. This is a piece of property that's been underutilized from our perspective for many years, and that has certainly a higher and better purpose for our community. The city is going to enter into an agreement with the Whitefish Housing Authority to essentially lease this property to help encourage development of what will be a 34-plus unit affordable housing project targeting 60% to roughly 120% of the area median income. So for folks, that's about a $32,000 to $64,000 per year annual income. And the project will consist of 12 townhomes and about 22 or so apartments. So we're making great strides to address the issues and concerns that you have identified as a community. That's kind of a global 10,000-foot level of how we're doing as a city. The state of the city is strong. We're doing well, and now I'd like to turn it over to Adam Hammett, who's going to essentially drill down department by department on some of the top goals and projects that we have scheduled for this coming year.
All right, so while we've got some of these affordable housing slides up here, I'm going to touch on that first, but I do want to reiterate a couple of things that the mayor mentioned, and I have to hand it to the city council. Richard, stand up real quick. I think you were down getting food when you got introduced before, but Richard Hilder, he's also a city council member and does a lot for our community. And I don't know that everyone realizes, but these are unpaid, completely voluntary positions. They give of their time and a lot of it to the community. So you want to get elected to city council, it's a whole lot of work and just a little bit of pay. But I will tell you, I think they will say that it's rewarding. Difficult, but rewarding. If you've come to council meetings or you watch us on YouTube, you'll clearly see that there are issues that are tough. I mean, there are two sides to every issue that comes forward, and trying to sift through all of the information that comes forward and make a choice is difficult, because the council knows that when they decide this way, these people are upset. When we decide this way, these people are upset. And it's tough to kind of march a community forward. But as you see, driving through town and living here, some of you lived here a long time and some not so very long, but as you drive through town, I think we're getting it right. Slowly but surely, I think we're getting it right. And we have to go through some difficult times for that. But I want to thank the city council for their foresight and their fortitude in working with all of these issues, even though sometimes they're very difficult. So thank you very much. I also want to point out the city staff. You can see them all lined up there. These are all the department directors. And hopefully everyone came between 5 and 7 so that they could have a chance to meet with the department directors. I tell you what, this is this is the best management team that I have ever worked with. These people are top notch in their field. These people have master's degrees and CPAs and law degrees. I mean, they're well trained, well skilled, well seasoned. They love the community. They love what they do for a living, and I've got to hand it to them. They really help me out a ton. And when I don't have to worry about a particular department, it means I can focus on a few other things, and that's what they do. And they just love this community. So thank you very much. And I know when I put in for this position, all the pamphlets and everything that was sent out on the position, affordable housing was at the top of the list. So I have made affordable housing my top priority as a city manager as well. And so I've taken an active interest and an active role in all the different committees and things that are being formed to try to push this forward. These affordable housing initiatives that we're working on aren't easy, and they're tough. And again, these are some of those issues that are a little bit divisive at times. But if we want to solve some of the problem, then we need to hit it head on. And I think we're doing that. And most problems worth tackling are the ones that have a real steep uphill incline. And so we need to march up that if we're gonna make this work. And I think we have a lot of good things going for us. We have a housing steering committee that has been formed. They meet on a monthly basis. We're tackling some of those initiatives that we put forward in the housing plan. And all these things are online on our website if you'd like to look at them and kind of peruse some of the things that we're gonna be working on and are working on. And so these are the things that are going to be moving things forward. I mean, as the mayor said, 52% of our workforce work outside of Whitefish and have to commute in. But from some of the studies that we've done, a very large percentage of those people would rather not make the commute. They would like to live in the community in which they work. And so I know when I first came here, I made the comment, wise or otherwise, but I made the comment that unless we want Columbia Falls and Kalispell to be our affordable housing provider, we need to do something about it. And everyone's like, no, we don't want that. We want to have this kind of character, and we want to be inclusive. And so that kind of really told me their level of commitment for moving forward affordable housing. So I'm really excited about some of the efforts we're making. One of the things that we do real well is we like to plan. We like to let people know what are the things that are coming up ahead. When things come down the pike, when we see projects, we like to funnel into these neat little funnels so that we can work them through our plans and then make sure that they're following the needs and desires of the people that have come forward to help create these plans. And as we move forward, so transportation and infrastructure is going to be a real big one. We've done corridor studies. The most recent one is the Wisconsin Avenue corridor study. But we've done a 93 West corridor study. We've even done a project out on 93 West. And from what I hear feedback from people and what I've seen out there, I think we're doing really well out there. I think we've got that nice corridor going through there. We've got those lovely boulevards. And we're hoping to see that kind of thing as we continue to march around the community. Right now, we're working on a corridor study for the Highway 93 South. So if you get an opportunity to come to some of the open houses and the public hearings and things that we have on that, please do. Your input is important, and it's the input that comes into these that formulate these plans that govern how we're going to be doing things over the upcoming years. Transportation is going to be a big one. I mean, as the mayor said, we got over 600,000 people that come and spend the night here at least once a year, but to expand on that a little bit, we know in the Flathead Valley that typically when someone comes and spend one night, they spend 6.6 nights on average. So when we have 600,000 people coming to Whitefish, they're not just staying one night. But in order to calculate the data, they say at least one night, but we know they stay a lot longer than that. And of course, that just expands our population, especially during July and August, immensely. And these are some of the things that are weighing on some of our infrastructure that we're getting to. Of course, transportation is one of those. How do we deal with that mass of cars that are coming in? And so we've got a lot of plans that are coming down the pike. Urban corridor transportation plans, we've got some things. I mean, obviously we have congestion here in July and August, and we want to be able to do something about it. But I don't know that we want to just turn things into 6-lane roads and funnel 1 million cars in and out of here. So we want to be able to do this wisely. We want to be able to efficiently move traffic and get people where they're going. So again, as these plans come forward, as we start to have some public input, please please come forward and provide us your input. Come to these open houses. We really welcome that. But you're going to see these things coming down the pike. Just be aware of them. One of the things I did want to point out during my speech tonight is that on the city's homepage, in the lower right-hand corner, it says email notifications. If you would like to receive email notifications about things that are going on in the community, see what the upcoming agenda items may be for various committees and groups that we have, please sign up for emails there. My list is closing in on 600. I typically send out an email every Friday, depending on if I'm traveling or in town. Sometimes I get it out on Saturday. Sometimes I don't send them at all. If there's really nothing coming up that next week, I'm not going to bombard people's email boxes. But I try to keep it to issues and things that are coming up that I feel are important. You know, a couple of things outside of agenda items that we did last year were when we had a fire ban. And I think it's important that we get people that information as soon as possible. So please sign up there. Moving on to Parks and Recreation. Maria? Wave your hand. So that's Maria Butt. She's the director of Park and Recreations. Yes. She does a wonderful job. One of the things I asked all my department directors to do was, before I give this, can you provide me some information for things that you're working on? And each department gave me a list about as long as my arm. Well, given the fact that you probably don't want to hear me talk for the next 4 or 5 hours, I had to really sift through and pick those things that I thought were maybe some highlights from last year and some things we're going to be doing next year. So that's one of the things we're doing. So last year, the James R. Bakke Nature Preserve. That's out on 7th West. If you've had a chance to visit out there, it's a nice, cool little spot. It's really cool what they did with the path and all of the informational signs that are out there. And that's our first nature preserve. It's about 4 acres. It was given to the city specifically for this purpose. And I'm glad that we were able to turn it into something of value for the community. I'm going to be cognizant of time, so I may fly through some of this. I know when I dig down into the weeds, and the mayor and I talked about just the sheer mass of information that is out there that we're working on, we're going to have to skip over maybe 90% of that to focus on the 10% that we think is probably more important for this venue. But feel free to get involved and look around on our website. The Depot Park Master Plan. We're still moving forward with a lot of different projects there. We've got the last couple of phases that we're working on leading up to TIF closing next summer. I want to make sure everyone's aware that our TIF does close out. We do pay off City Hall and the parking garage next year. I think a lot of people think, oh, we're going to be paying for that forever. 1 more year, a little over 1 year, and then we'll have it all paid off. We're working on the Depot Park Master Plan. I think you've seen the improvements that we made last year. I think we're making some great strides there, and this is going to be a place that's going to be kind of a center focal piece for the community, where obviously we have farmers market and all sorts of events down there that people have come to love and enjoy. A couple things coming up. The Armory Park's going to be receiving some improvements. We're going to see adult fitness area, picnic area, pavilion. There's going to be some dog park upgrades. And I think most of you may know, and if you don't know, our dog park is ranked in the top 10 in the country. That's just how Whitefish rolls. This is something I'm really excited about. I grew up in Great Falls, but I'd come over to Whitefish pretty much on an annual basis. And we'd love to go down to City Beach and take the kids down there. But where do you park? Always parking blocks and blocks away. But we're going to be adding 24 more parking spaces there. So that's a project we're going to be tackling here. I think we start within the next month. So we should finish up shortly thereafter. So we're excited to see some of that. We're going to have a place where you can offload your kayaks in kind of a staging area, in a little grassy area right here. Here's some of the parking spaces, a few more, and then some parallel parking spaces down here. But I think it's going to add some nice little green area, 24 parking spaces. I think it's going to be a real positive addition for City Beach. I think it's been a while since we've added some parking down in that area, so I think this is going to be a welcome. Of course, our public library. I know we have a couple of people from the library here tonight. Our library just does phenomenal. If you don't have a library card there, well, there's 10,200 of you that do, but I would recommend going to get one. They have just a fantastic library over there. They started in 1925. They're the 6th largest library in Montana. They've got 57,000 items in there, but they have access to over 1 million items. So pretty much if you want something, they'll probably be able to get hold of it for you. They run 206 programs, have over 1,000 attendees, and of course a lot of people with with library cards. So I got to hand it out to the library for all the good work that they do over there. Finance. This is one that I felt would be kind of a hot topic because everything's like, all right, I want to see where the city's going, but then I want to see what it's going to cost me. So those are things that I'm going to spend a little time working here. So the first one we'll touch on is the annual budget. A couple things I want to point out there. We always have a balanced budget. I just will not deliver a balanced budget to the city council. Now that doesn't mean we don't spend more than we take in. It just means in other years we saved up, and then we're going to be spending some of that money on a particular project. But on a year-over-year basis, we're always balanced. We're not going to spend money that we don't have or don't have access to. One of the things I also wanted to point out is when you look at your tax bill, there's a lot of different charges all over the place on there. But when you add them all up, the city really only accounts for a little less than 27% of your tax bill. And we all love kids, we all love education, but it is kind of the main driver of our tax bill. It's roughly about 55% of your tax bill that goes to education, whether it's local or higher education. We do have a fiscal budget that runs from July 1st to June 30th. And then also one of the things I wanted to make sure and point out for Dana's sake, because she does such a great job with all of the finances here at the city, that we have had clean audits since 2014. And that's tough for a lot of communities. A lot of times an auditors will find what they call a finding. And usually it's not anything major, but if you can get an audit that doesn't have a finding, you're really doing well. So thank you, Dana, for all that you do there. Here's a slide that shows the property bill breakdown. You can see the city coming in about 26.7%. And then you can see most of that pie is covered by a lot of the education, whether it's elementary, high school, state, Flathead Community College. One of the things we do like to point out is our really low mill rate. So if you look at us compared to a lot of other cities, Missoula coming in at 260 mills, we're way down at the bottom at about 120. I will say one of the reasons we're down at 120 is because if you look at your tax bill, you have a minus sign on there for resort tax relief. That takes about 47 mills off of there. So if we didn't have that, I will admit you would be about 167. But if you look at that, that would only move us up one place in the rankings. So one thing I do like is we do have that resort tax relief. We are able to keep mill rates low because of that. And so that's something that we have done really well. We have a lot of businesses in our community. Kind of a little tidbit for you. We give business licenses to over 1,100 businesses. And keep in mind, our population isn't that big, but we have a lot going on here. Tax incremental financing. That's one of the things that we use. That was the tool that we used to finance City Hall and the parking garage. And I know that was a very divisive thing, but it's built. It looks beautiful. I think I have received a lot of compliments, even from some that started out detractors. I gave tours to some of them, and at the end of the tours, they would be like, "It's nicer than I thought." And it's like, great. I'm glad to see that we can kind of come around a little bit. But who can argue about 212 parking spaces right here in downtown? It's a safe place to park. I see that thing packed all the time, and I'm grateful that it's here and we were able to do it. And I know a couple people have told me, how are we going to pay that for 20 years? Next July, it'll be completely paid for. And we didn't have to raise taxes at all for it. That was the growth in the community that brought in the extra tax dollars that we're able to do that. And so that's a phenomenal thing that our community accomplished with that. Of course, we've done a lot of other things too. We've got some projects coming up this year. We're going to be putting some money towards the wastewater treatment plant. That's Central Avenue. We call it the Central Avenue slump repairs. As you make that corner road down on South Central as it turns into 6th Street there. For whatever reasons, going back to 1934, if I have my dates correct, Craig, that just kind of slumps into the river slowly but surely, and it's constantly taking some money to address that. That's one of the things we're looking at addressing yet again. Depot Park final phases, City Beach parking, and the Baker Avenue underpass. Now that's where we're hoping to put a bike ped underneath the Baker Avenue, but of course we need a corresponding grant for that. So if that doesn't happen, it means we probably didn't get the grant, but we're sure trying to make that happen. Resort tax has been another big help to the community. I think it's a popular tax for a couple of different reasons. I think people like to see that minus sign on their tax bill, and I think they like to see that others not living in Whitefish, all these 600, well, we get 1.2 million people travel through here, but 600,000 spending the night. But those 600,000 spending the night are spending money, and every time they spend money, they're racking up resort tax. And I think people like to know, I think it just feels good that you know that others are paying for this. They come in, utilize our roads and all of our services, and it's nice to have a mechanism where they can kind of contribute to that. And so we get, since 1996, we have over $40 million that have come in from resort tax. 10 million of that have gone back as a minus sign on tax bills. Over 20 million has gone towards infrastructure. I mean, these are just phenomenal things that we're able to accomplish with that. Municipal court. Our court does wonderful things. I think Judge Heilman is still here. You still here, Judge? Oh, there you are. That's right. All right. There's our judge. He's been doing great work in the court. Let's give him a hand. I know he's been making some positive changes there. In the past, we were closed during the noon hour, and now we're not. That way, if you have to take care of a fine or parking ticket or other citation, you can go do so during your lunch hour. And I think that's been well received. I know he's put some video hearings in place if there's a hardship. So he's been doing some things to improve the court, improve the efficiency of the court. A couple of statistics that we have from last year. There was 3,874 charges filed, but they adjudicated 4,129 cases. So they're taking on a lot over there over the course of a year. And then they handled 5 jury trials as well. So I really appreciate all of the work that's been going on over there. I've been hearing great things about the court and the efficiencies that have been gained there. Our fire department, Joe Page, give a wave. So Joe's our fire chief, and last year in 2018, we handled 1,906 calls for service. This represents about a 31% increase since 2011. And I will admit, quite a few of those calls go to tourists, and that's what I mean by they utilize a lot of the resources that we have. And so I'm grateful that resort tax helps. It doesn't directly go to the fire department, but we can take on projects that don't pull money away from the general fund. So it's kind of an indirect way that they can assist us in providing the services that we provide them. Kind of a little known thing about the Whitefish Fire Department, they do not just cover the city of Whitefish. So if you look up there, this blue area that I'm trying to outline without shaking too much, that's the city of Whitefish boundaries. The other is, so we have a fire service area that covers another 84 square miles outside of there. And then we even have an ambulance service area that covers 140 square miles. So we go way out there in providing all kinds of service. So it's not just for the city of Whitefish. We cover a pretty good expanse. But they've got a great team up there. I just put a few pictures in here of some of the things. Obviously, they do tours and all kinds of things. But one thing so I used to be a firefighter paramedic for the city of Great Falls. And so I know what it means to have a paramedic level emergency responder show up at the door. And every one of our firefighters, except for one, is a paramedic. So when you have people show up at your door, they're the highest trained possible in the emergency response setting. And I think that is just phenomenal, because these are the people that can help you stay alive. These are the people that can get you pain medications before you even get to the ER. And I know when you have a cracked femur, pain medication's at the top of your list. So you're looking for those kind of things. So I really appreciate everything that the fire department does. Police department, another wonderful organization. Bridger, thank you. Bridger is our assistant chief. Bill Dial is out for some surgery here, but Bridger does a great job up there. The whole police department does a great job. I know Kevin Conway was here earlier tonight. Just a phenomenal police force that we have up there. They run about 12,500 calls per year. There's 17 full-staffed police officers. And again, when we balloon up to 20,000+ people in the summer, things get really busy. We love our partnership with the Whitefish School District, where we have school resource officers that go over to the schools 9 months of the year, and then in the summer they can float back into our department pool. And that has been huge so that we can build our numbers up for when the numbers come in July and August. So again, hats off to our police department. Human resources. Human resources are our number one asset. As I talked about our department directors, the level of skill and expertise that we have does not stop there. It goes all the way down through. And that's why we've seen some great things happen over the last several years as we continue to improve our ability to do a lot of things, and I'll touch on them later. But we do have 109 regular full and part-time staff. I'm going to say off the top of my head, full-time we have about 106, 105, somewhere in there. Top-notch people all providing great services to the public. This is just kind of a slide on how they're broken out by department. And Sherry. Sherry's our Human Resources Director. She does a tremendous job on recruitment and retention and working through all of the myriad of benefits and insurances and all of those things that come with having employees, and updating all of our position descriptions and policy manuals. And it's kind of an endless job, so I really appreciate all the work and effort that she does. And when we add great employees, a lot of that is because Sherry's kind of working with department directors to make sure that we can sift through and find the best of the best when we add employees to our group. So thank you very much, Sherry. Planning and building. Dave Taylor, give a quick wave. Dave is the department director over planning and building, and we have so many things going on in our community. Again, as I talked about before, we do all kinds of long-range planning. They provide zoning administration, land development permits. I mean, they processed 231 applications last year. And that's just an amazing amount of things that are going on in a community our size. From the building side of things, estimated value of new construction was about $53 million last year. I mean, we've just really been growing. There's just a lot of things going on, a lot of construction, a lot of homes being built. And they just do a great job there. If you get to meet Tad, our building inspector, great guy, straight up. And I think we've accomplished a lot of great things in that department. So thank you very much, Dave, and to your crew. Public Works, Craig, give a wave. Craig spends a lot of money. But he does it with a smile. I think everyone is aware that our wastewater treatment plant is being rebuilt, and we're starting that here right away. That's about an $18.5 million project. One of the things I want to point out with both wastewater rates and water rates, because I know a lot of people, one person in particular came into the council meetings like, why are rates so much higher compared to other communities? And probably one of the largest reasons for that is because we have to build plants that handle our maximum daily loads. So, and we see that July and August. So when we balloon up to 20,000+ people, we have to build a plant that can handle 20-some thousand people year round. Even though those people leave and we drop back down to 6,500, 7,000, somewhere in that range, we've got to be able to provide all kinds of water and wastewater services to those people. So it requires a much bigger plant than we would need if we didn't have all that tourism. Now, that tourism kind of makes the world go around to some degree when they come in and spend money in our community, and we keep the businesses flowing and the jobs flowing that we have. And of course, resort tax takes onto that. But it does take a toll a little bit on some of the rates. So we are going to have some water plant improvements as well. We're getting tapped out on the amount of water that we're pulling and delivering into the system and all the people that are using it. There's going to have to be some conservation efforts that flow out of this. So you're probably going to see some changes in how we decide we're going to conserve water for irrigation. I know Craig and his crew have done a phenomenal job of tightening up our system. So infrastructure is a problem nationwide. Everybody talks about it. The president's been trying to do infrastructure bills. I know that the state legislature's been trying to help us with infrastructure, but we can't wait. We need to move forward and we need to do some things. And Craig and his crew has done that. I want to say probably this time last year, maybe a little earlier, we were having some significant water loss in our system. And they have really tightened it up. And I've just been so impressed with how we've gone out. We've done a big leak detection audit. We've looked over everything. We've had some cast iron main replacement projects. And Craig and his crew have really been able to tighten up our system. And that's really going to help as we're trying to conserve water and also make sure we have a little more water for some of the projects that are coming up. So the next resort tax project that we're going to have is State Park Road. I think many of you, not all of you, have been out to State Park, and as you head there, you got some pretty wicked 90-degree curves in there, where we're looking at urbanizing that corridor and kind of cutting across, taking out those two 90-degree angles. So this is resort tax funded, so this comes from the extra 3% that you pay on things and purchased in town. And I think that's going to end up being a fantastic project. That's going to be done over the next 2 years and wrap up in 2020. One more thing that Craig and the crew did really well on last year is snow plowing. We have had so many compliments come in to City Hall for the efforts that Craig and his crew have made towards improving snow plowing. We went to alternate side parking. I get it, it's a little bit inconvenient. We put up signs, we implemented this last October 1st so that we could have a time between then and when the snow fell to issue a lot of warnings, just to continue to remind people that, hey, once the snow starts falling, we're gonna have to issue citations or do some towing. But I think for the most part, I think people got it, I think they understood it, and so we had a great year with snow plowing. As you can see just in one of the pictures, we've improved in our alley plowing. Typically, alleys were at the bottom of the list, but we're working with a local contractor so that we can get on alleys a little sooner. And people have just been thrilled with the level of plowing that they have received in the alleys, out on the streets. And even the plow guys, not having to dodge around cars all the time. And they can just cut into that gutter and run all the way down the road. Makes a huge difference when you're trying to get the snow taken care of during some of the snowfalls that we have had. So thank you, Craig and the crew, very good there. We've recently passed a climate action plan. So we're going to do what we can to help our environment. We adopted this in 2018, and it definitely represents a set of challenges to cultural, recreational, and economic values that we have in Whitefish. But we want to reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions by 26% by 2025. We want to be a carbon neutral city by 2050. A couple of things that we're looking at doing in regards to the wastewater treatment plant is we're hoping to put a solar array out there. Now we're working on all kinds of numbers because we want there to be a kind of a positive payback. But we don't need a lot of the lagoons that we have over there, so we're going to have some land freed up that we're going to be able to do some solar generation on. And also a bunch of room out there that we're looking at planting our own tree farm out there. So we actually get some nutrient credits when we can take some of the effluent that goes into the river from the wastewater treatment plant and use it to water all these trees. So we actually gain a credit by doing that. And so we're looking forward to doing some sustainable practices out there. So Craig and the crew, thanks again for all that you do for sure out there. And we can get into questions, but I also just want to note that we have City Attorney Angie Jacobs here. She does a great job keeping us all on track and keeping us from doing things that we shouldn't be doing. Angie, I really want to do this. Adam, you can't do that. You got to do this. So everyone keeps me in line. We did have a little technical difficulty with one of our other mics that we were going to pass around. But if any of you have questions, I'll probably repeat the question because we're recording this right now and streaming it live. And so probably won't be able to hear you. Even if you have a loud voice, it needs to kind of come into the system. But if there are any questions, I will do my best to answer them. Yes. Yes. I don't have a slide of that here, but so the Depot Park, based on what you saw down there, is spread out into 4 different phases, which are going to pretty much be done simultaneously or broken out, some this year, some next year. We have some discussions we're going to have at the city council level, but that kind of rounds out all of the Depot Park master planning that has been done. Maria, anything to add to that as far as maybe any of the particulars?
Well, we have sort of, for a discussion this evening, we'll have 3 options for the construction schedule, and there's 2 phases to the depot, or 3 phases to the Depot Park Master Plan. We've done the first one, so we're on our second and third, and within that, we've broken those into 4 tasks that need to get completed. And so the discussion is, what's that timeline for getting that completed? Either this year or by July 1st of next year, when the TIF runs out.
Yeah, and these are tasks that we need to wrap up before the TIF concludes next July. Any other questions? Yes.
Mayor John outlined all the wonderful things that are happening on the north side of conservation easement and everything else. Outside of town is another story. Losing character.
I think you bring up a good point, Leo, and we have these discussions pretty frequently. I know you're aware that years ago the county tried to pass an actual open space bond that went down in flames. We're having these discussions with Whitefish Legacy Partners. You're aware, one of 3 tenants that they operate under is conservation, and so we're looking at opportunities down the road. We're not really sure what those opportunities will look like, whether or not we'll seek our own bond to help with conservation purchases. The other strong partnership that we were able to formulate was with the Trust for Public Land, and as you know, their mission is to connect people with landscapes and parks within downtown or municipal extents. So we've been having discussions with TPL as well as to what that could potentially look like down the road. It is out of our control, so it would take a willing partnership with the Flathead County Commissioners. Any other questions? Bob?
Adam, do you have anybody in board right now that functions as an arborist? Provides herd over the street trees and parks?
Yes, we do. So we have Philip Hodge in our Parks Department. He's our resident arborist, and wickedly talented and experienced there. So we're trying to cut him loose a little bit. So our urban forestry program that we're working on, we're really trying to breathe some life into that. And so we've actually acquired some equipment, or will be acquiring some equipment. We're adding some seasonal employees, and so we're going to be tackling that issue as far as we want to know about the trees. We want to know which of them are kind of in the hazardous zone. We want to take care of any of the hazardous trees that we have, and we want to take good care of all the trees in the community. So, but then also on the planting side, we want to be planting more trees. So as we take some down, or as we try to trim up, that we're kind of replacing those. We're encouraging people with Adopt a Tree. We offer, so when we're doing a project, so let's just say Summers Avenue, we offer up trees that we're putting in the boulevard. We can have them for the same price that people can take them and put them in their yards. So we're trying to go a lot further into the realm of urban forestry than we've gone before to try to help our trees that we have. And we have 3,900 trees, I think, that are just the city's trees. So we just need to make sure we can inventory them, that we know exactly, what they are and issues that they may have, so that we can take care of them a little better. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.